Good afternoon. Welcome to our luncheon program. We hope your conversations have been insightful exchanges. Now, here to moderate our next inspiring discussion, Authentic Leadership, a fireside chat featuring Julio Portalatín. Please welcome to the stage Hacer's Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, Sylvia Perez Cash.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying today's lunch. It looks delicious. I can't wait to taste it. But we have a very exciting conversation with, again, a very dynamic individual. I would like you to think about, in advance, all the things that you want to ask, because we will have lots of time. And the point for both of us is to make sure that we hear from you and incorporate your interests into this conversation that I'm very excited about. So our luncheon speaker today is currently the independent board director of State Street Corp and the retired vice chair of Marsh McLennan Companies. He's the former president and CEO of Mercer, a business of Marsh McLennan that delivers advice and technology-driven solutions to help organizations meet the health, wealth, and career needs of their workforce in more than 140 countries. And before I bring him up, I just also want to say he's a man who lets his values, what's important to him, drive all his decisions. And I think that's key to his success. So please, un gran aplauso for Julio Portalatín.
Gracias, Sylvia.
De nada.
Hola.
So before we get started, as I said, we are going to have an opportunity, lots of opportunity for Q&A today. And what Julio and I discussed is actually beginning our conversation with some questions that we will refer to throughout our discussion. So with that, I wanted the most eager first hands up. I want the top 3 questions from our group today. What would you like us to talk about as we think through authentic leadership and the rise to the corporate board? First 3. 1. Next one. I just want the 3 first. The first one's over here. I need number 2 because I want them in advance so we can prep our team. 2, right here. En una latina, por favor. Lo siento, mi amor.
Right there.
Right here. Thank you very much. Equity of voices is very important. All right, so question number 1.
I think I'm cheating because you gave me like...
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Sorry. Jose Anaya from Honeywell. One of the points you mentioned in our quick conversation, but great conversation over there, you mentioned about the 2008 crisis and how you were dealing there. Crisis and accountability, how do you deal with that and those like tough moments?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Question number 2, right here.
Napoleon Peralta, Bank of America, and I'd be interested to know about your style and your leadership, and if that evolved over time, and if you let your background come more into play as you mature in your career.
Thank you. Number 3.
Hello, I'm Ana Usua Maldonado. I'm a Scrum Master at the Hartford, and I just want to hear a little bit about how we can engage anyone that may not necessarily be as welcoming for the Latino community as we become leaders. I think that there's been a lot of good progress towards diversity and inclusion, but sometimes there's still some work to just engage and open those conversations to anyone that still needs to join the movement.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Can we work with that, Julio?
Absolutely. Awesome questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. So we'll kick this off with a grand story. And I want to say that I think Julio's story is truly emblematic of the pathway to success that we've alluded to throughout our time together this week. After obtaining your degree in New York, you worked for 12 years with Allstate, and in various executive roles. That you achieved your first CEO role, quickly followed by your second within a 3-year period, right? As president and CEO of Chartis Europe and continental European region that was based in Paris. So we're talking global relocations, global work scope. And then president and CEO of Chartis Emerging Markets. By 2012, you were president and CEO of Mercer. Then in 2019, you became an independent director. And now, you have served on 3 corporate boards, and I'm sure there are many more ahead of you. In addition to, of course, prominent nonprofit boards, which we've already discussed as a very strategic positioning as well for leadership. So if that wasn't impressive enough, because this is my voice, and you didn't come here to hear me talk today, right? Let's bring some color into this impressive story, and I say that intentionally. How would you describe your rise to the C-suite and your definition of authentic leadership that brought you there?
Thank you, Sylvia. Let me first start off by mentioning to you folks how important this organization is to the overall objectives that we are trying to accomplish as a Latino community. It cannot be underestimated under Sid's leadership, the ability to be able to bring front and center the issues that are so important and paramount to be able to bring a path for that long journey that still we need to take. Yes, progress has been made, but a lot more needs to be made, both in the executive suites and on the boards. It's not the greatest story, although a proud moment, when we say that I'm the first Latino to serve on a GSIFI, globally financially important systemic institution in 200 and some odd years. I mean, yes, a proud moment, but it should have happened a long time ago. So we got more hills to climb, but this organization is at the forefront of that under Sid's leadership, and I just want to thank Sid for the invitation. Thanks, Sid, for the partnership, the friendship, and adelante, okay? So, I wish I could sit here and tell you that I had this grandiose, secret sauce, in terms of how you put yourself in a position to be recognized in the fashion that I have been honored to be recognized in my career. But it really is all about, and I said this to some of the group earlier today, is I went to Punta Cana recently to celebrate my brother's 60th party. He's my little brother, so I am 60 plus. And he said something when I was up saying something about him. He got up and said something about me, and he said something he never told me before. And one of the things he says, I have never met a more driven person in my entire life. More driven to accomplish what he sets his mind to accomplish. I say that to you because as Latinos, you will likely see more barriers than others. You will likely be in environments that perhaps may not be the most welcoming environment. You will also face unbiased and biased. All sorts of things will come your way. But just think about this. If you see every single one of those opportunities as opportunities to learn and overcome, how much of an advantage you will have over others that went through with no barriers. Every company and every board wants people that don't allow barriers to get in the way. They want people that find a way, find the path, get around it. So, quick story. My early career, Allstate Insurance Company, many years ago. I was hired with 6 other people. It was during the age of affirmative action, so no doubt that those 7 were affirmative action candidates, 4 Latinos and 3 females. Okay, 7 people hired, and they used to call us the Magnificent 7. And I was in that group, and other people that joined in other regions around the same time started getting promoted, and I didn't feel like I was being recognized. So I walked into my boss's office, and I said to him, what's the story? I'm working late, I'm working hard, I'm doing the jobs nobody else wants to do, I'm putting myself in front of them, taking risks, doing all this. And he said 2 things. He said, number 1, you're scaring people. I said, I'm sorry, what do you mean you're scaring people? He said, your activity is so off the charts, your energy is so crazy that you're scaring people. Even the people that are going to decide your career, you're scaring them. I said, so what do you want me to do? He said, keep doing what you're doing. Because we need to change too. Lesson number 1. Lesson number 2. He said, and by the way, did you ever look around the people that have been promoted in higher places? And what do they look like? I said, well, besides the fact that they all look like you, white male, besides that, he says, yeah, but nobody has a mustache. He said, you should go home and think about that. So it wasn't the color of my skin. It wasn't all that other stuff. It was because I had a mustache. So I went home and I thought about it. I wrote up my resignation letter. I came in the next day. I put the resignation letter on his desk, and I said, this is not the company for me. And he said, oh, no, don't do that. Please take it back. Take back the resignation letter. I didn't mean it. I just wanted to give you a helpful advice. And I said, no, I'm not shaving my mustache. And 3 weeks later, I was promoted. So believe in what you believe in. Don't give up on your beliefs. Remember that others have to change too, not just you. All right? And you got to meet in the middle somewhere. And those things that are really important to you, hold them tight. Let them be your value system. Let them be what makes you proud when you look in the mirror every day. Because that's more important than anything else.
And to take that a little bit further, let that be the definition of authentic leadership.
You know, authenticity is all about being yourself. And that's examples of it right there. Mm-hmm. It's all about being very self-aware, though, also about what being yourself means, how you project out. And I learned that early when he said you're scaring people. Okay, so you need to also be very self-aware about your authenticity. And you also have to, you know, it's a little bit of sprinkling of other things too, like inspiration, a little bit of that, a little bit of putting people first, but truly in the decisions that you make. That doesn't mean you never lay off people if that's good for the business. You have to do that, but you obviously are pained by that decision. And I was pained by it when we had to do that in certain places around the world, and made sure that the families' needs were taken care of. When we went through the financial crisis in 2008, I was in Paris at the time running the AIG operations for Europe. I walked into my first town hall, and everybody had very sad faces on their faces because they didn't know whether we were going to survive the next day or not. And I said, I'm going to work really hard for your families. From that moment on, nobody worked harder than that group. That's all I had to say. I'm going to work hard for your families. For your kids who I've met, the ones that I know you're going to be saving for college now, and the ones that definitely are going to need you to make sure that you got a really secure place. Doing it for your families. We renewed 98% of our customers. Usually we renew 92%. Better than we did before the crisis. And it was the first true test as to whether or not AIG was going to make it or not, because $5 billion of revenue was going to be renewed 3 months after the crisis started in September of 2008. Remember that. First true test, we renewed 98% of our business because of those people in that room that believed and followed. Go ahead.
So, and I hear that, and I heard a couple of things that I want to point out. One is that, you know, earlier we talked about how being identified as an other has its advantage. Helping transition into this concept of I to we, right? Alma said that. The idea of identifying with the community where you may not have before, and the value of that identification. Julio said something similar, but from a slightly different approach. Having the obstacle, the barrier that we know exists, that too is an opportunity that those who don't have barriers don't have. They don't have all the additional learning opportunities that come when we overcome those barriers. Also, a very strategic advantage that contributes to the power of Hispanic inclusion in our leadership roles, right? And then the last thing I would share before we move on, we talk about your leadership style, which came up right in the beginning, is how centered self, transparent and honest identification with self is to all of your processes in terms of how do you decide how to motivate people? Well, you connect to their families because you're connected to yours, correct?
That's absolutely correct. And you know, it's not always going to be the right answer. I can point to examples where I made a conscious decision to myself that my whole life was going to be about putting family first, where I had a boss who didn't particularly agree with my decision in a particular circumstance. So here's one. Does anybody know Hank Greenberg? He is the legend of the insurance industry, okay? He's still a CEO. He's 96 years old. He runs a company called CV Star. It's a private company, but it is a global insurance company. Before that, he was with AIG for decades as the CEO. So his son was working and running international. I was in the international division. He came to me and said, boy, do we have a job for you. We're going to give you the crown jewel. I said, oh, wow. Then I go, upon reflection. 3 months before that conversation, I told him and his father that you have 3 months to move me anywhere in the world, but once my daughter starts high school, she's staying there for 4 years. If you come to me after she starts high school, it's a no, so don't bother. 2 months after my daughter starts high school, we want to send you to Japan. Now, for those who know a little bit about AIG, it's the crown jewel. It's the crown jewel. It's the absolute crown jewel. There's 2 jobs at AIG that are crown jewels. Running Japan operations or Far East, and the second one was running the accident and health business. Remember that, I said that. So his son says, well, you can't say no. I said, Evan, I told you, Evan Greenberg. He now runs Chubb Insurance, by the way. He's CEO of Chubb. He says, Evan, I can't say no to my father. I said, yeah, well, I will. You won't, I will. Because I told you guys that I'm not going anywhere because my daughter's going to finish high school where she starts. And so he says, well, you're going to have to go talk to the old man, is what he called him. I said, sure. So I go talk to him. I walk in the office. He makes me wait, all for effect, of course. And he walks in, and he says, I hear that you don't want to go to Japan. I said, not that I don't want to go. I think it's an honor. I'd love to go. I'd love to go do the job. I'm honored that you feel I can, that I can run this big, huge operation that's so important to the organization. And he said, so what's the problem? I said, I was hoping that you guys actually took me serious when I spoke to you 3 months ago and told you that I would not go anywhere once my daughter starts high school. But it's only October. She just started. Yeah, she started. You said for 1 month you're going to give up the opportunity of a lifetime? I said, yep. Because on the first day of school, my daughter was celebrating and jumping up and down because she knew she was going to be there 4 years. And I am not going home and telling her otherwise. So he said, all right. He walked out and then walked back in. He said, I respect it, in a very grovelly voice. I respect it. And then I said, and he started walking out. I said, one more question. He said, what? Is this going to impact my career? And he said, we'll see. Remember I said the second most important job at AIG is running accident and health? 3 years later, I ran the global operations for accident and health. So what's the point? Figure out what your values are. Figure out what's important to you. Make a stand, but be cognizant and self-aware of what the implications of that stand is. And then make a measured decision about it. I was asked earlier about family versus, you must have been faced with a lot of these. Oh gosh, was I faced with a lot of them. And if you read my LinkedIn, if you follow me on LinkedIn, there's a big conversation on this, and someone asked me to point out, and I said it, and I'll say it again. Stop stressing. Everyone makes your own individual decision, and stick with it. To me, it was never a decision to be made. It was always going to be family, no matter what. And if it meant consequences, then so be it. Lost my wife when she was 41 years old to lung cancer. My son was a sophomore in high school. He was having his junior prom. He said to me, Dad, I know you're supposed to be in China. This is what kind of kid this kid is. He's a lovely kid. Don't worry about getting back for my junior prom and taking pictures, which all parents do, of course, with their kids during proms, whether it's junior or senior. I changed my entire agenda. I took a red eye, and literally, I got out of the car and ran in for the first picture. Because I didn't want him having those pictures without me in it. Because that memory would last forever. So this isn't This is about stories along the way. Real stories, real decisions, real potential consequences to those decisions. But I know that the person that I got to live with every day is the one that I see in the mirror. That's the person I got to be proud of when I look in that mirror. And everybody else can come along for the ride.
Thank you. So, we now get a sense of exactly who you are, right? I mean, I think that's pretty fair to say, right? And I want to explore a little bit more of this other question that we got around the evolution of your leadership style. And I want to kind of go with this sense of, when did you feel that your knowledge of self, so confident in your knowledge of self, that it started to drive your leadership style? And did it evolve over time? Or is it something that you identified with fairly early and then maintained throughout your career?
So my younger brother tells me that I always was driven from the very first days that he remembers, and he's 4 years younger than I am. Certainly I picked and chose differently as I grew up the corporate ladder, made different choices along the way, learned a lot, of course, of what works, what doesn't work, what potentially could be something that could help in furthering along my career. But I want to say something very obvious, maybe not so obvious to people. I never planned to be a CEO. I just didn't. What I planned, when I was a junior in high school and I was living on Long Island and I was there with a bunch of friends sitting on the highest point, Bald Hill, looking over this beautiful white building with all these sprinklers going and everything else. And I looked at them and I said, one day I'm going to work in that building. And they all laughed. That's all I needed. First day, graduated from Hofstra University. I went and applied for a job there and got hired as one of those seven people I mentioned earlier. Got hired as one of those 7 people, and it just happened to be Allstate Insurance Company. It didn't matter, but it was, okay? What did matter is that I had put a goal out there, and I said to myself I wasn't going to let anything get in the way. I was going to make that goal. Period, end of conversation. So early in my career, I said to myself, being driven, I guess, is a good thing. Even though until my brother said that, I never really meant myself as being driven. I was motivated, I was passionate, but I was never thought of myself as being driven, but it's a good word. And what you drive to changes as your career goes. Now, the question I got asked in one of the other sessions recently is, can you learn to be driven? In other words, is this something that's born inside of you, or can you actually learn it? What do you think? Sorry? It's a learned behavior, right? Okay, anybody else?
A show of hands.
By the way, so how many people think that it's learned? Raise your hand. How many people think it's inside of you and it's a birthright? Okay, so more people think that it's inside of you and it's a birthright. And I will tell you that although that helps, you can learn to be driven, all right? Just make sure that you line yourself up to what's important. The things that excite you, the things that are passionate, that makes you passionate. And make sure that those things dominate your life. And always look at barriers to overcome as an opportunity to achieve one of those things. Because if that's what motivates you, and that's what gives you passion, then line those things up. And by the way, if something doesn't connect to those things, you probably shouldn't be doing it anyway. So it's okay, make choices. But I did learn as time went on about the things that I felt very comfortable aligning myself to, and also equally learned those things I felt uncomfortable aligning myself to, and by those choices, things continue to happen. Nobody ever outworked me. I was never the smartest guy. Never. Although some people will say, the little arista traits that say smart, sharp, and all that stuff. All right, that's nice, but that's not me. That's not me. I'm authentic. I expect, and by the way, if you want to be successful in this world especially, you need to be that. You need to be transparent. You need to align your goals with things that you can accomplish and make sure that they're aligned with things that make you passionate. Because when you're passionate about something, nobody's going to stop you. Nobody's going to stop you. I said to the other group, and then I'll say it again. If you look at barriers as being opportunities for growth and opportunities to overcome, you will all be on boards one day. You will all be on boards, and you will all be on the executive suite. Every single one of you. The ones that won't are the ones that waddle on all the problems there are that get in your way of being successful. The ones that say the environment's not right, they're not receptive to me because of the color of my skin. They're not receptive to me because they don't like people with mustaches. I have a beard now, so I'm definitely going against the establishment. In any event, think of that. If you walk away with just one thing today, drive yourself to look at barriers as opportunities to overcome, learn, and ultimately be better for. That's it. And you will all be joining us on boards. There's not one board that doesn't want a person like that. There's not one executive suite that doesn't want a person like that. They'll overlook all that other stuff if you do that better than everybody else.
So you did mention the color of your skin. And I bring that up.
It plays.
Yeah, because obviously it doesn't define your leadership, and it doesn't define who you are. We know that. But it would be naive to suggest it didn't affect your experience in this in corporate America. And so I was wondering if you could share, when you think about, whether currently or in hindsight, as you've developed as an executive, as a leader, as an advocate for Latinos and all people and all, right? What role does your race and ethnic identity play in your experience? And what do you see for today's, what opportunities do you see for today's leaders of color that you did not have?
So in the early days of my career, I was blind to this. I'll be honest with you. I didn't think about it at all. Upon reflection, I can give you a million stories about what happened along the way. All right? I said, wow, now I get it. All right? So it's there, is the point. Whether you want to recognize it or not, whether it's biased or unbiased, or it's obvious or it's not, it's there. You could even argue that today it might be there more than it's been in the last 10 years. You can make that argument today. All right? There's been some sort of cultural revolution that's taking place, good, bad, or indifferent, that in certain circles around our society, it could be even more challenging today than it was 10 years ago. I'm not going to get into that. We could spend 3 days talking about that. So the point is, are you going to say to yourself, all right, how do I make a difference in that space? How do I put myself out there? How do I allow myself to somewhat be vulnerable so that I and others can gain? Now, that comes from a different comfort level depending on where you are in the organization. I totally get that, by the way. It's a lot easier to do when you're a CEO than it is to do when you're just starting your career. But every environment has an opportunity for that to happen in its small way, medium way, or big way. So I'll tell you, stick to your values. So when I joined in 2012, I got the honor of being the global CEO of Mercer, as was mentioned earlier, 27,000 employees, servicing over 100 countries across the globe. I have visited 75 of those countries, 120 cities. When I was with AIG, I also visited a bunch of countries and everything else. The point was that on my first town hall, I know nothing about the business, really. I mean, except what I've read. Not enough to be a CEO yet, right? So you're learning. And I get asked the question about, well, what's important to you? I said, what do you mean what's important to me? Well, what do you think are the things that are most important to our culture and how we're going to develop as a company? I said, I'll tell you what. I'm going to spend some time figuring out what the current culture is. Then I'm going to answer that question, but I don't want to answer it today. But I will tell you this. Once we decide what's important culturally and what the value system is going to be of this organization, I'm sure we'll bring some of it along from where it's been traditionally. Once we decide that, you have a decision to make. Because they will not be negotiable. Our value system is to be a value system that everybody embraces and acts towards every single day. If you don't like them, you have one choice. Because those cannot be sacrificed. Those cannot be monitored. I had 150 people join me in the process of establishing what those values should be. So it's a truly bottom-up process. People, opinions all over the place, and we got them. We got the values. Passion to win. I even remember them. Respect for. So it's a passion to win, respect for diversity and inclusion, and the PRI. I was innovation and independent thinking. And D was decisiveness for our clients, dedication to our clients, dedication to our clients. And E is empowerment. You will act as if the company is yours when you make decisions. Those were our values. 5, pride. They spell out pride. And I said, that's it, here they are. Somebody says, well, pride has another connotation. Don't care. 150 people said this is a good thing. Sorry, I'm empowered by those 150 people. Live by those values. If you walk through that door, I do care what you do outside of those doors, but I cannot dictate what you do outside those doors. But once you walk in those doors, these are them. Pride. Display them proudly. Don't put them in a drawer. I want them on your desk. I go around the world, every town hall, first question I have is, what are our values? First question. They all know it, too. And they got it all memorized. Don't know if they know it any other day, but they know it that day. But my point with all of this is that there's a value system that you have to believe in for yourself and for the companies that you join. I mentioned in the other group that I have turned down more boards than I've accepted. That's true. Significantly more, by the way. Because I have a set of things that I want to accomplish when I go on boards. And if you don't meet those things, I don't care if you miss one, I don't join. It's really that simple. DEI is one of them. You better show a real strong commitment to DEI, not just in speak, but in actions, in metrics, etc. You're measuring it, you're trying to make success. Just like any other business plan, you have a measurement, you have metrics, you hold people accountable to it. Boom. State Street, got to give them a shout out. Anybody know who the fearless girl is? Mm-hmm. Come on. Come on. All right, your homework assignment. You have got to go and you got to Google fearless girl. Please do it. You'll know why I joined State Street. Mm-hmm. Fearless girl. Also, top 10 actions post the events that happened with I was going to say Rodney King. That's really going a long way back. George Floyd. Post George Floyd, again, 10 actions were introduced by State Street. They were publicly published to all our investors everywhere else. We monitor against that. We measure against it. We don't make progress. We're transparent about it. We make action plans to improve it again and to do the things that we said we were going to do in those 10 actions. Alive and well in the board, not just in some other meeting, in the board. Ron O'Hanley speaks about, again, LinkedIn, follow Ron O'Hanley. You want to hear about a CEO that gets in front of issues, very, very sometimes controversial issues. He also runs one of the biggest global asset companies in the world, which means that he's running funds and he's investing money for other people, and he's making requirements about how many females and representation you should have on boards to big companies. Ron O'Hanley does that. That's why I'm on that board. So make choices. Value system is important.
So you've already addressed this concept of accountability and how you implemented that, both by establishing your values as the core barometer, right, of performance. I would translate it that way. As well as how D&I was situated in not just your internal company's values, but your external evaluation of what you are going to align your leadership brand with and your the acumen that you bring to any organization that you join. I want to address our final question that we started off today about what happened when you found resistance to inclusion in any of those spaces. Whereas the organization maybe has a demonstrated commitment, but not every individual you encountered has had that commitment. So what would you advise in those situations?
Well, I mean, a lot of these changes that have to take place are cultural in nature. And, culture is a very difficult thing to change. But the person who should take the most responsibility for the culture you want to create is the person that sits on top. Because that person is the one that speaks to what's important in our culture. That's the person who eventually allows people to self-select whether they want to be part of that culture or not. Tough decisions have to be made. And just like as I make my decisions about what boards I'm going to join, I think you have to make the same decision about what companies you're going to work for, based, in my view, on the culture of things that are important to you. They don't have to align with the things that are important to me, but they have to align to the things that are important to you. And make those conscious decisions. Don't allow things to get in the way of them. There are plenty of companies out there who align with your values, every single one of you, all right? Maybe the first job coming out of college, you want that first job, I understand. Maybe you'll sacrifice a little bit, but after that, no excuses. No excuses. Pick and choose wisely. Also pick and choose wisely the people that you surround yourself with, because they will make you better or worse. You know, so remember that. You know, always surround yourself with people that are going to make you better. They're going to allow you to achieve the things you want to achieve in life, whether it's personal or business. And make conscious choices about not aligning yourself with others that don't. You just can't pile on and hopefully balance it out. No, those people are out. Those people are in. Those companies are in. Those companies are out. Choices. We all got them. Because my ultimate thing to you guys is I do sometimes worry about groups of people that blame everybody else for what they're going through. I worry a lot about that. And by the way, some of you in this room. And I just encourage you to resist that. To resist that. And to make your plan. Adjust along the way, but make your plan. And go do your plan. Go make it happen. Get help from others. Get help from sponsors, from mentors. If you don't have one, go ask somebody to be one. It's interesting to me. How many people have active sponsors in this room? Raise your hand. Active, meaning that they are, okay, so that's about 35% of the room. That means 65 don't. There's only two choices, right? So to me, if you don't have one, it's one of those things again, well, they haven't assigned one. Well, they haven't felt that it's important enough, that I'm important enough to them to give me one. Astonishing. Go get one. Go get one. Go make it happen. You are in charge of your careers. Don't blame anybody else if you don't make your aspirational goals. The question was asked over there, what if you don't have a welcoming environment? Leave. First, try to change it. Try to engage people. Try to be that change. I was lucky enough to only work for 3 companies in my entire life. Allstate, AIG, and then Mercer. That's it. Okay? Throughout those times, there were times when I felt unsupported. Of course. You can either stay and make the change, or you leave and get a better environment. Those are your choices. Again, there aren't any other choices. We make this very complicated when it's not that complicated, okay? There's a lot of demand out there for great skills. Make sure that you're aligning yourself to that demand curve. Get educated, be constantly learning, be curious, ask questions. That means you're in lifelong learning mode. Lifelong learning does not mean you're in a classroom for your entire life. It means that you're always learning. That means you're always asking questions, you're always curious. My 9-year-old granddaughter said to me, "Papi, why do you know so much?" I love that. Wait till she grows up and realize I don't know half the stuff that she asked me. But I said, well, I ask a lot of questions. I asked a lot of questions. She goes, yeah, but that means you don't know. No, that means I'm learning. Very wise conversation, wasn't it? So I share that with you. Asking questions does not mean that you're vulnerable because you don't know. It means that you care, you're curious, and you want to know. Whole different viewpoint. And I will especially say this at the risk of being not politically correct with females. I will especially say it with females. So many times I was in a room, I got to tell you, and we had opportunities, and I had a room full of people, and there were female and males in there, and all sorts of different persuasions, but the big distinction was female and male. We had a nice representation, and I would say, look, there's this job coming up. Some of you guys qualify for this job. So I'd love to hear, who wants to be considered? And almost invariably, 6 or 7 hands will go up. 5 of them will be men, and 1 will be a woman. The other women are like, I think I'm ready. I need to do this other job for at least 2 more years. If I didn't think you were ready, I wouldn't be asking you. You wouldn't be in that room. So whose problem is that? Mine or yours? Folks, stretch yourself. It's okay. Be that person that's curious, that's always learning, and you'll always be in a position for another role. Always. Always. So those are I've exhausted all my coaching tips. I have no more.
Well, and to own your choices.
I have no more. No more to offer. If that doesn't work, I don't know what we're going to do.
Well, and to own your choices, right? So we have a little bit of time for a couple more questions.
Oh, gosh, hands are
the
going
first
up.
three are from this side of the room, so I'm going to even it out. And we have a question over here.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, Carolina
Would
from
you stand up, please?
Accenture.
I hope nobody was offended by my comment about especially females. It actually is something that I have generally observed numerously over decades. It's not something that just happened once. Go ahead. Yeah, of course you can.
Okay, wait. Can you wait for
Can we get a mic over there?
well, can
Oh, well, let's have a
have
question,
this
and
lady
then I'll get
first,
you,
and
okay?
then we'll
All
have
right,
it.
thank you.
So it's related to this topic. In women forums, leadership forums, we talk a lot about imposter syndrome.
I'm sorry?
Imposter syndrome, when
Oh.
you really kind of have a second thought
Yep,
if you
yep.
deserve to be there,
Right,
et cetera, right?
Right.
And I think it kind of composes with what we are hearing today. We need to have trust, create the trust, and have a good communication. But it's all about confidence. And the question for you is that, do you have that moment because you're super confident? But do you have the moments where you have second thought? It's okay if you don't. But
Oh, no,
if you
absolutely.
have,
Absolutely. I was definitely.
How you deal with that?
I'll do a
Yeah.
very recent one. I joined the State Street Board 3 years ago, 3.5 years. It's a very complicated board, by the way, incredibly complicated board. It has a history, like I said, 200 years plus. It's got a lot of legacy systems. It's got a tremendous amount of risk factors that are associated. It was considered for a period of time by the Fed as not being properly managed, so we were under a lot of scrutiny. And we're out of that deficit now, but nonetheless, a lot of scrutiny. And the complexities are off the charts. I mean, off the charts. I was scared. I joined the board. I learned as much as I could about the State Street company beforehand, but it still didn't put me in any position to be able to make strategic decisions. Absolutely not. And every decision was important because of the state of where the bank was at that time. And the reality, and dealing with the Fed wanted to interview me. The Fed wanted to ask me questions about risk. You know, here I am, a new board member. They put me on the risk committee, which, by the way, I know earlier someone talked about the audit committee. The risk committee in financial services is the most important committee. All right, so if you ever want to get a lot of attention, go to the risk committee, okay? It's also the only board, at least on State Street, and I would imagine for other banks as well, that actually compensates additionally for all positions on the committee, as opposed to just the chairs. The chairs all get compensated additionally, but to show the importance, every single committee member does. So I was assigned to the risk committee. So I'm getting asked all these questions. I have no idea. I have no idea. So I'm learning, and I'm digging into books, and I'm reading the history, and I'm reading as much as I possibly can. And then 1 year in, they actually reassigned me. I was on the Tech and Ops committee, too, by the way. I stayed on the Tech and Ops and went to HR. They figured out global head of Mercer probably ought to be in HR, right? So I went to HR. And now, third year in, I'm back on the risk committee because they changed the chair, and they wanted to make sure that people had experience that were on the board. So my point is that there's a lot to be scared of in new assignments and new opportunities, but nothing is rocket science except a rocket scientist. All right? If you've made it to a certain point in your career, it's because you're pretty darn good. Are you going to take the additional leap, or are you going to stay in that comfort zone? I very rarely saw people become CEOs or big leaders of businesses that were comfortable in their comfort zone. The ones that strive are the ones that are comfortable with discomfort. Those are the ones that drive. Those are the ones that ultimately make it. The ones that are comfortable with discomfort. So yes, the answer is yes, I do get scared. And yes, I do feel like I'm not qualified for certain things even today, after all these years. And I hit the books, and I learn, and I overcome it. So the next time the Fed asks me the question, I got the answer. Or I got a better answer. Let's just say that. So yes. Let's go right there, yeah.
I'm Luz Ojeda with UPS. Sorry for interrupting you. I'm learning bad habits from my white, males in my team. So I had to correct that, and that's a task for me.
So UBS was a very big client of AIG during the 2008 crisis, and I spent a lot of time with UBS at that time, so I know them very, very well.
Yeah, it's a really dominated ambient, and now that you're saying LEAP, we are implementing a LEAP program. It's Latina Executive Accelerator Program.
Okay.
And it's, and what I wanted to say, the comment that I wanted to say is that it was created by a Latino, So I truly believe the Latinos here are our allies, And I love that you mentioned that, and you said, like, if I'm putting this in the table, it's because you're ready. Mm-hmm. But they need to hear that. Mm-hmm. Like, Latinas in here needs to hear that. I've been broken these 3 days in my program, saying you need to speak up. Mm-hmm. It's not a one-lady job. It's all of us. And I know that I'm ready, and I'm being like talking with all my VPs. I'm ready for a promotion. Like, I can execute, I'm intelligent, I'm smart, and I'm super open to diversity and inclusion. What's going on? Mm-hmm. And I made them uncomfortable. I'm like, it was 22 years ago that we had a president that was Latina in UPS. Why? We need to close that gap, Mm-hmm. And I can feel how they like, ugh, and I'm like, what? Like, seriously, this is need to change, So that's the theme that I need to keep hearing, Julio. And I'm so grateful for these minutes with you, because I need reassurance that it's possible. Mm-hmm. So I haven't left UPS because they invest in community. They invest in my community. And that's one of my values, Mm-hmm. I give back to my community.
Good for you.
And I'm trying to change it. Right. That's why I'm there.
Right.
But I'm going to give you a couple of years, as you said. If they don't change, I'm moving,
Good for you.
Yeah. But thank you so much.
You're welcome. So, being given permission to take control of the environment and the companies you work for is very important. You have that permission. Even though you've never met me before, or many of you haven't, the reality is that sometimes we need to hear that we have that permission to take control of our careers. And yes, the environment sometimes will be positive, sometimes it won't be so positive. So yes, I think your valiant effort to try to change that environment is the first step. And the second step is, it doesn't change, you move on. I mean, I'm sorry, that's just the way life is. And it's going to be that way in your personal life, too, by the way. How many guys did you date before you found your guy? How many girls did you date before you found your girl? I mean, you made decisions along the way. Some of them were good, some of them weren't. And here you are.
Julio,
so why should a career be any different?
We have a question over here, Julio.
Hi, Jessica Robledo Garcia, North America Supply and Demand Senior Director for Procter & Gamble. So some context. Yesterday was the first time I ever realized that getting onto a board and having a goal of getting onto a corporate board was something for me. So I've got a lot of lost time to make up for. I'm going to send a note to my leadership and talk to them and put down that I want them to help me get onto a nonprofit board with the company, because I have a goal to get there in a year. So my question back to you is, what advice would you give me in addition to that to make sure that I can get there in a year?
Okay, so the first advice is send me your CV. Okay, thank you. Second advice is to find sponsors that are already on boards to be able to bring you along faster. Since you say you're behind, I don't know anything about your career, but I'm going to take what you said as being accurate. You're behind. You got to find folks that are going to be able to. Firstly, do you know anybody who's on a board? Besides me, of course. One other person? Are you relatively engaged with that person? Okay, all right. Yeah, you should engage with that person, and also connect with people that know people that are on boards. So not necessarily somebody you know. And most of the time, and I think it was said in a previous session today with the 3 esteemed colleagues, they talked about how relationships really matter, and it's so true. It's so true. Most of the boards that I decided not to join were actually boards that came to me through headhunters, not through affiliations of relationships. Why? Because those people who know you know the fit better, right? They know a little bit more about what you're likely to be excited about and what that company is going to get in terms of what they're looking for and what they're going to get. So there's going to be a higher success ratio. That doesn't mean no success with other avenues, and you should use them for sure. Use all avenues. Don't ever knock any of them out. But relationships do matter. And so my point would be try to develop those relationships as best you possibly can. People that are on boards, people that you know, people who know that are on boards, and send me your CV.
We have
You're welcome.
a question over here in the far corner. I'll move out the way.
I feel like I should be doing a TED Talk now, you know, so.
Hola, Laura Lowe, PNC Bank. You talked
What
about
bank, sorry?
PNC Bank.
Ah, PNC, gotcha.
Big Pittsburgh. But you talked a little bit just now about relationships, right?
Yeah.
And the ability to not only drive, you know, change on corporate boards, but to drive change, period.
Mm-hmm.
I think as Latinos, we are great connectors. And I wanted to hear a little bit from you about how your connections to others have driven change. And also if you have any tips for someone who's like kind of trying to pull it all together, pull people around your passion, and make change for the Latinos that come after us.
You know, there's a very important, great question, by the way. Terrific question. There's something that is easier said than done. And that is that when you think about what's important to you, see if it aligns to what's important to a company, organization, or group. Because when you have that commonality, you generally have more motivation to get it done and more impact along the way. If they're disconnected, you probably ought to not try too hard. Because the fact of the matter is, it's going to be a lot of frustration, a lot of time. Maybe it pays off, maybe it doesn't, but increase the opportunity for success by having that alignment about what's important. Now, people that are not engaged, but they kind of are curious, those are the good people. It's all right not to totally get it. It's all right not to be totally committed. It's all right as long as you're open to the journey. You're open to the possibilities. And you know, no manager should ever become a manager that's not open to the possibilities. And if they're there, they shouldn't be there. It's really that simple. When I joined Mercer, by the way, we had a lot of people that were really good consultants, and because you were a good consultant, all of a sudden you became a manager. So we did a disservice to all the people that person manages and to the person. Because we basically said the only way you can be successful is to be something that you may not want to be. So we then made 2 career paths. We improved a couple of positions over here on the consultancy side. It wasn't just a partnership. Now you can become a senior partner, and you can become a global senior partner. 2 more positions where you can make more money and be recognized for who you are, that individual contributor that loves customers. So we started moving some of those people over there, and then we started hiring people that could really be good managers. Right? So my point is that you're going to meet mismatches along the way. And all you really want to look for is for the people that can make a difference in what you're trying to accomplish that are open enough to be able to change. If they're not, it's going to be a really tough journey for you. I can't see it any other way. So I always tried to pick. Did anybody ever hear the story about picking your own board of directors? All right. Well, that's the same as making sure that you surround yourself with people that are going to make you better, that are going to make you stronger. Pick your board of directors. You know, really spend some time saying, that guy I really want to work with, that girl I really want to work with, that person I really want to work with, because I know that if we work closer together and we share perspectives, that we're both going to be better off and we're both going to be in a much better place when we're done with that journey. Make that conscious decision. And in a place where the culture doesn't support it, there'll always be some in there who want to change it. Find those. Find those that are in good hierarchical positions, who want to have the ability to understand, to be educated without feeling like they're being educated, because they're higher, so you got to be careful. And at the same time, learn and open and want to be then joining the journey with you. And if all that doesn't work, go somewhere else. I'm serious. I can't say that enough. And I say that because I so emphatically believe that you are in charge of your career. I know I said it 4 times. Now this is my 5th time. My commitment is to say it at least 5 times every time I speak. So there it is, 5th time, 6th time, 7th. You are in charge of your career. You are going to decide whether you're successful or not. You are ultimately going to decide whether you sit on a board or not. And if you are that person that I described earlier that is always going to look at an opportunity, you're going to be better than everybody else who doesn't have those opportunities, and you will be successful, period. End of conversation. That's what it takes.
All right,
That's it.
We have our last question in the back. It's our last question.
Hi, my name is Maria Rimes. I work for Stanley Black & Decker in the Human Resources Department. My question
I've got all their tools.
Yes, we have discounts now.
See me after the meeting.
The question that I have that I often see with leaders is that they're really good at managing up, impressing their manager, the leader, the people, because the growth is there, right? They're looking for the growth. But they forget to manage down, and they forget what it takes to get where they are. So I guess the question that I'm asking is, what advice would you give to those leaders here in this room as to how you manage that in your career? How did you manage up and down? Because people tend to just focus up and forget the people at the bottom. So I'm just curious to hear that.
The most challenging part of changing culture in any company is generally the managers in the middle. That's the most challenging part. First thing, they are the ones that control most of the sentiment, employee sentiment, culture sentiment, reward for performance, whatever, is all pretty much controlled with that middle layer. You can usually get the top layer to rally around something, depending on what the CEO wants them to rally around. And you usually get new people that join the organization with a lot of enthusiasm to be able to adopt and embrace, the mission, the purpose of the organization, the vision, the values, all of that. It's like, wow, this is so exciting, right? Then they meet up against this middle part. So many of you in this room are in that middle part, by the way, right? Okay, I thought so. Out of curiosity, how many folks run P&Ls? Run a P&L. Out of curiosity. So 2, 4, 6, 8, I see 10, 11, 12 hands. I see 12 hands. So by default, that means the rest of you don't. We need more people running P&Ls. Because I think it was said by the group earlier, incredibly important. The vast majority of requirements for a board is P&L management. That doesn't mean you won't get that niche response, that niche target for an HR person or a target for a person who has certain skills that are outside of running a P&L. But the reason why P&L is so important is because you learn a lot about the business, but you learn a lot about a lot of stuff, right? It's a very broad learning experience. Run businesses, important. Run financial statements, important. The ability to be able to make choices, to be able to improve the P&L one way or the other, sometimes very tough choices. So that's why it's a very broad type of learning that you take place, and that's why people value the P&L so importantly. So when everything is said and done, there is that whole context of what's important to you, what's important to the company, lining yourself properly, and ultimately being able to drive that alignment to conclusion of what you want to accomplish. Did I answer your question? Where are you?
In the back.
Yes, there you go. So that person, those people in the middle, hardest ones to bring along to the journey, but the most important ones to bring along to the journey. And the reality is that we also have to step up a bit. I go back to the mustache thing. And people thought I was crazy walking into my boss's office after being in the company a year and a half and saying, why am I not getting promoted? I want to know, what is it that I need to do? I wasn't getting that coaching, so I wanted it. I went in and I talked to them about it. So the same thing happened. I have employees who walked into my office and said, I was offended by what you said. And I welcome those conversations. I'm glad that we're having them. And if, in fact, there is a boss that's managing well up and not managing well down, they are going to have to be open to that conversation because, quite frankly, their credibility is going to be incredibly challenged, which means people don't want to follow people that have credibility issues, right? That's kind of table stakes. And so you do yourself a favor, you do the group of people that are being managed by that person a favor, And you also do that person a favor by bringing to their attention that they might be weighting a little bit too much to one side versus the other, and then giving them examples, not just saying it, but actually give them examples and say, look, in this opportunity, missed opportunity, perhaps we should handle it this way. I'll be helpful in being able to do that next time. If you just ask me, I'll help. Whatever. You got to have the conversation, though. You can't, again, be in a position where something's not happening and you're letting everybody else resolve it except you. Remember, one of the 5 values, fifth one for Mercer, was empowerment, and it was defined as run the company as if it was yours. So if the company is yours, are you going to allow for that group not to come along for the ride? Are you going to allow that group to manage better above than manage below? Guarantee you, if it was yours, you would not. So fifth value, empowerment, run it like yours.
Well, I want to thank you.
Are we done? This has been exciting.
It's hard
Thank you
to
so
believe.
much.
I just want to say there has been so much. And I'm going to do my best to capture these words of wisdom. And I would just say, own your values and sense of self, own your choices, and own your decisions. And then you will succeed. Does that do you justice, maybe?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I will say this. I look forward to, in 10 years from now, for some of you who are now advancing your careers, to see you all on boards, if that's what you want, or to see you in the executive suite, if that's what you want. We would like that, but do you want that? So be that change.
Thank you.